The forest huddled close, a brooding giant cloaked in perpetual twilight. Twisted branches, gnarled and ancient, clawed at the sky like skeletal fingers. Wind moaned through the trees, a mournful dirge that echoed the secrets buried beneath the forest floor. Travelers shunned this path, their instincts whispering of things best left undisturbed. At the heart of this desolate expanse stood Raven's Rest, a solitary inn brooding beneath the watchful gaze of the woods. Its silhouette, stark against the dying light, resembled a skeletal hand beckoning weary souls toward an uncertain fate. The inn's very name seemed to hang heavy in the air, a whispered promise of shadows and secrets. Few dared to brave the inn's hospitality. Those who did spoke in hushed tones of the innkeeper's son, Norman, and the unsettling stillness that clung to him like a shroud. He was a specter in the shadows, a whisper of unease that lingered long after the fire had died down. Norman Bates. A name whispered in the village, a name that elicited nervous glances and hurried steps. He was an enigma, a young man trapped between boyhood and manhood, his features a mask of quiet deference that did little to conceal the unsettling gleam in his eyes. His smile, thin and fleeting, never quite reached those eyes, leaving an impression of something cold and calculating lurking beneath the surface. Norman possessed a curious hobby, one that set him apart from the other villagers: taxidermy. The walls of Raven's Rest were adorned with his creations, a menagerie of lifeless eyes that seemed to follow your every move. Birds of prey frozen in mid-flight, their talons outstretched in silent menace. A fox, its lips curled back in a silent snarl, forever suspended in a moment of predatory grace. And then there was his mother. Confined to a wheelchair, her face obscured by a shawl, she was a constant presence in the inn, her silence more unnerving than any scream. Norman cared for her with a devotion that bordered on the obsessive, catering to her every whim with an almost frightening intensity. The storm broke with the fury of a beast awakened, unleashing its wrath upon the forest. Rain lashed down in relentless sheets, driven by a wind that howled like a banshee. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the gnarled branches and the treacherous path leading to Raven's Rest. Marion Crane stumbled through the darkness, her clothes soaked to the bone. Fear gnawed at her, a cold and unwelcome companion. She had lost her way, lured off the main road by a shortcut. The sight of the inn filled her with relief and trepidation. She had heard the whispers about Raven's Rest, but the storm showed no mercy, and she had no choice but to seek shelter. As she approached, the door creaked open. A figure materialized in the doorway. It was Norman, his face a mask of polite concern. Come in," he urged. "You must be chilled to the bone." The interior of the inn was a stark contrast to the raging storm outside. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls adorned with Norman's unsettling trophies. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and something else, a faint, cloying sweetness that Marion couldn't quite place. Norman bustled about, preparing a hot meal and offering her dry clothes. Marion, still shaken from her ordeal, found herself drawn to the warmth of the fire and the strange, unsettling charm of her host. Yet, beneath the veneer of normalcy, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was during dinner that Marion first heard the raised voices. They came from upstairs, a muffled torrent of anger and resentment. Norman stiffened, his eyes darting nervously towards the ceiling. "Just a disagreement," he mumbled, his voice strained. "My mother, she can be a bit difficult." The argument continued, escalating into a full-blown tirade. Marion couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, accusatory, venomous, filled with a chilling rage. Norman sat rigidly at the table, his face pale, his eyes fixed on some unseen point in the distance. Sleep eluded Marion that night. The storm raged on outside, but it was the argument that kept her awake. Curiosity had been planted in her mind. Who was this woman that evoked such fury? Marion decided to risk a glimpse into her host's life. She crept down the hallway, The door to Norman's mother's room was slightly ajar. Marion hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She knew she was overstepping, yet she couldn't resist the allure of the unknown. With a deep breath, Marion pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with sweetness. In the center, shrouded in shadows, sat a figure in a wheelchair. She recognized the figure from the taxidermied owl. It was the same owl she had seen earlier. Marion realized the horrifying truth. The figure in the wheelchair wasn't alive. It was a meticulously preserved corpse, and those eyes seemed to be fixed on Marion with an accusing glare. Section 6. Beneath the floorboards. Panic seized Marion. The faint, sweet smell that permeated the inn, she realized now, was the unmistakable odor of formaldehyde. Norman's unsettling hobby, his strange devotion to his mother, it all made horrifying sense now. As she backed away from the gruesome tableau, her foot caught on something lying on the floor, a loose floorboard. She tripped, her hand instinctively reaching out to steady herself. The floorboard shifted under her weight, revealing a dark, gaping hole beneath. Curiosity, morbid and insistent, overcame her fear. Holding her breath, Marion peered into the darkness below. The air that wafted up from the hidden space was stale and cold, heavy with the stench of decay. As her eyes adjusted to the gloom, she made out a shape at the bottom of the hole, a human hand, its skin waxy and pale, reaching up from the darkness as if in silent supplication. Terror lent wings to her feet. Marion scrambled back, her mind reeling from the implications of what she had stumbled upon. Norman's taxidermy skills, his unsettling demeanor, the arguments with his mother. It was all a terrifying facade, a carefully constructed illusion designed to conceal a horrifying truth. Section 7. Flight and Pursuit. Adrenaline surged through Marion's veins, a potent cocktail of fear and desperation. She had to get out of Raven's Rest, had to escape the suffocating presence of its secrets and the chilling truth lurking beneath its surface. She stumbled back down the hallway, her mind racing. The front door, she had to reach the front door. But as she turned the corner, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking her path. It was Norman, his face now devoid of all pretense of normalcy. Gone was the timid, deferential young man she had met earlier. In his place stood something cold, calculating and utterly predatory. His eyes, once merely unsettling, now blazed with a terrifying intensity. He moved with a swiftness that belied his slender frame, his hand darting out to grab her arm. "You weren't supposed to see that," he hissed, his voice a low growl that sent shivers down her spine. Mother wouldn't approve. Section 8. A Grisly Preservation. Marion struggled in his grip, her heart pounding against her ribs. She twisted and turned, trying to break free, but Norman's grip was like a vice. He dragged her back down the hallway, his strength surprising in its intensity. "It's for the best, you know," he said, his voice taking on a chillingly conversational tone. "Mother needs her rest. She's always been so high-strung. But she's at peace now, preserved, just the way she wanted to be, just like the others." He led her into a room she hadn't seen before, a dimly lit workshop filled with the tools of his macabre trade. Jars of formaldehyde lined the shelves, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. And in the center of the room, a sight that made her stomach churn. There, arranged with a chilling artistry, were more figures, their skin waxy and pale, their eyes forever fixed in a vacant stare. Men and women, their features twisted into grotesque masks of horror and despair. And among them, seated in a place of honor, was the preserved body of Norman's mother, her face frozen in an eternal grimace. Section 9. Eternal Silence. Marion's screams were cut short, swallowed by the storm raging outside. The rain continued to fall, a relentless torrent that washed away the tracks leading to Raven's Rest. The forest, ever watchful, closed ranks, concealing the inn and its secrets within its dark embrace. Norman worked through the night, his movements precise, his expression serene. He took a certain pride in his work, in his ability to cheat death and preserve beauty in its most fragile form. And now, he had a new subject, one that would join his collection. her beauty forever frozen in a silent scream. The Raven's Rest stood silent, its secrets secure within its walls. The forest held its breath, a silent accomplice to the darkness that festered within. And in the village, whispers of missing travelers and unsettling encounters continued to circulate, a chilling reminder that some places are best left undisturbed. For within the walls of Raven's Rest, death was not the end, merely a transition to a different kind of existence, one ruled by madness, obsession, and the chilling artistry of a son's devotion.